Netflix stock took a significant tumble, due mostly to a drop in subscribers.
While the stock has rebounded modestly since that initial drop, there's reason to believe the entire streaming industry is experiencing a slowdown. Here to discuss why several on-demand platforms are suddenly struggling and what it may mean for consumers is Daily Wire entertainment reporter Megan Basham. Megan, thanks for coming on.
Always good to be here, Georgia.
So I think a lot of people are under the impression that the streaming business is just one big success after the other. Is that not true anymore?
You know, it's really not. So viewers at home really don't seem to have the appetite for all these subscriptions that they once did. There's a really big sign of that. Nearly 500,000 people dropped their Netflix subscriptions last quarter. And to put that in perspective, that marked the first time the platform has lost customers in 2 years. But you can't just talk about Netflix in this discussion. Disney, too, though it has seen some improved growth recently, its new streaming subscriptions are still tracking pretty far below long-term expectations. Overall, only 3.9% of U.S. homes added a new streaming service in the last quarter, and that's down from 12.9% a year ago, so the biggest drop in several years. But more than just not signing up for new platforms, Americans are canceling the ones they already have at a record rate. So what the financial outlets are calling subscription fatigue, that's very real.
And do we have any idea what's causing this?
Well, we have some good educated guesses backed by, pretty solid consumer research. First thing, there's, of course, the COVID factor. As lockdowns began to lift, people suddenly weren't as interested in staying home and binge watching TV as they used to be. Yeah, it's pretty easy to sell your product to a captive audience. But you pair that with the price hikes these companies have to make to stay profitable, and that makes it easy for people to walk away. And then there's also the fact that we may simply be hitting a saturation point. There's something like 300 streaming platforms now. Surveys show people are just starting to feel overwhelmed by all of these a la carte choices. Polling also highlights a lack of quality content. Folks pay to get access to these big, buzzy shows, but then when they tune in, they find that they're not as good as they were expecting. That's something that's happened to me a couple of times.
Yeah, it's happened to me too. Any other factors?
Well, this one is a bit circumstantial, but I do think it's worth exploring. So last year, I'm sure you're going to remember this, Netflix became embroiled in a scandal over this film titled Cuties.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, that movie featured 11-year-old girls performing sexually suggestive dance moves, and it outraged the public. The hashtag canceled Netflix started trending on Twitter, and multiple consumer groups started petitions. Well, to some extent, those campaigns were successful. Netflix cancellations went up 800% immediately following all that backlash. So this led to some news outlets taking a look at the social messaging these platforms are attaching to their highest profile films and series. A couple of months ago, for example, I reported on internal Disney evidence that audiences began turning off that big Marvel series, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, once the storyline turned overtly political. Investors, too, are noticing. In recent shareholders' meetings, Disney CEO Bob Chapek received some questions about the company's decision to fire Mandalorian actress Gina Carano. It's also received some questions about the LGBT content in children's shows. Some other reporting has pointed out Netflix's generally left-leaning PR machine that's pretty heavily promoted deals with people like Barack and Michelle Obama. Now, there doesn't appear to be any polling that specifically asks about streamers' political messaging. I find that a little curious myself. But industry watchers are wondering if that thing we call the get woke, go broke effect couldn't be playing a role here, and maybe that's part of the reason Netflix is the #1 platform consumers are canceling.
It'll be interesting to see if all this causes these streamers, or Netflix in particular, to change their approach.
Yeah, it definitely will.
Thanks for coming on, Megan.
Thanks for having me.
Daily Wire entertainment reporter Megan Basham.